Jane Strong, co-founder of the Equus Effect, works to support our veterans, first responders, healthcare workers, and many others, and all with the help of horses.
A veteran showing up at the Equus Effect will find that just even their initial contact with the horse can be a really uplifting experience. Just getting their hands on them provides for a release in oxytocin, and they start to feel the calmness.
We feel that horses are tremendously valuable in terms of bringing them back home, bringing them back into relationship with other people in civilian life, and also giving them a chance to be with the outdoors, be with horses, which are a gateway back to your own true nature, is what we believe.
I realize that not everybody suffers from the same problems, and I'm sure that anybody with at all levels of post-traumatic or any of the other battles that they're fighting within themselves, that they'll find something here, and the horses will settle you down and teach you that that there is a peaceful way of adapting to the new environment that we're in compared to the environment that we came out of, which was exactly the opposite.
One of the things the horses has done for me is the hypervigilance that I usually have. When I'm working with the horses, all I see is the horse. I don't see everything else around. It's just the horse. So it's very different, and it's a new sensation. It's been a long time since I've felt that way.
Having this unique experience with the horses here and connecting with them has just made me a lot more comfortable with the horses and with other people too. Just being able to drop your armor, drop your shields, around you, and just be more open and help you to relax and not focus on things that are bothering you right now in your life when you make that connection with the horse.
The horses, as prey animals, they come with this innate way of being with constant threat and homeostasis, which is grazing. They can move back and forth between these states with agility. A lot of the veterans coming back, they stay up in that state of threat.
The day that Apache made a connection with me by choice and chose to follow me and demonstrated that he trusted me, helped me to realize that I could trust myself. Because a horse has no agenda, and the horse is just, opening itself up based on its perception of the situation. And because a horse is hypervigilant, and some of the symptoms of what we experience and deal with as veterans with PTSD is that same hypervigilance. If a horse is choosing to disregard their hypervigilance and trust, it kind of gives you permission to allow yourself to do the same thing.
This is a way of helping them adapt, and it's a way of coaching them back to become the incredible, talented, resourceful leaders that they are.
Hello and welcome. I'm Caroline Phipps, and welcome to Living with Inner Elegance. I am thrilled to have in my studio today Jane Strong, co-founder of the Equus Effect. Hi, Jane.
Hi, Carolyn. Thank you for having me.
I am so happy that you're here. I wonder if you could share with us a little bit about the mission of the Equus Effect.
Sure. Well, it started in 2008 when David, my partner, my co-founder partner, and I saw the statistic about veterans taking their own lives at the rate of 22 a day, which was staggering to us. So we had been working with horses for the benefit of people for a few years, and all of a sudden it galvanized in my mind, and then in David's mind, these are the people we need to serve. Because if 22 a day are taking their own lives, that means that the help they're seeking or the things they're doing to avoid that or to find meaning and purpose in life isn't hitting home. The things they were doing through the VA or whatever weren't hitting home. So we decided that I actually just knew the horses could help. I knew if we could get these folks back in their bodies, get them doing something where they were learning, where they were curious, where they were navigating something that required action and congruence, where your insides match your outsides, and be in a position to learn something in a novel situation, that perhaps they would settle down and be able to move forward in their lives.
Well, that's a spectacular mission for our world. It makes me wonder, lots of people are struggling with finding meaning and purpose in life. I see that all the time, people saying, I don't know what to do. I know I need to be doing something. And clearly you found your purpose and your mission. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how you came to that point in your life.
That's a good question. So I would say that my career, I had been a competitive rider as a kid. So I loved horses. I knew I loved horses. I also knew that as one moves up in the ranks of competition, that it's kind of all-consuming. That's what you're going to do with your life.
Yeah.
And I think I realized when I was in high school that I wasn't sure I wanted to be entirely in that world. And so I sold my horse, wound up going to this girls' school where I had to pay attention in school. And I wound up going to college in Boston, and then became out of that became a cultural anthropologist. I studied American culture and history and literature and stuff. And I was very interested in what makes people tick, like what makes people make the choices they make, and how is American culture different from other cultures. And I just wound up in the world of market research, because that's a way to personally find out what motivates people to make the choices they make. And of course, the field itself is all about selling products to people. So that wasn't exactly a noble thing. I was trying to help people sell pizza and different bank cards and all this different stuff. And that part of it wasn't really satisfying. But the part about sitting with people and finding out what made them do what they did or not do what they did was fascinating. So when 2008 came along, my work kind of disappeared because of the crisis, the financial crisis. And at the same time, just before that, I had gotten back on a horse, and for the first time in years. And what happened was my mind was scared, really scared, to be back on a horse and feel rusty. But my body said, there's something about this that's really good. And then I got this message, it's not just good for you, it's good for other people. And I was like, what does that mean? And so I had no idea, but I knew I had to follow that. So I found a school in Tucson, eventually found a school in Tucson that taught people how to facilitate this kind of work on the ground. Because I knew it wasn't about riding. I kind of knew that. And I didn't know anything but competing or trail rides. That was the only thing. There wasn't anything in between. So I knew that wasn't it. So I found this school in Tucson called the Equus Worldwide.
Oh, yes.
And this
yes.
woman, Linda Kohanov, had written a book called The Tao of Equus.
Fantastic book.
Yeah. And that was a real game changer for me in terms of how am I going to relate to horses in this other way. Because her work was all about meeting them eye to eye, totally respectful of them as sentient beings. And I mean, anyone who's ridden a while ago in traditional horsemanship, you kind of told the horse what to do.
You sure did.
And that was it, right?
Yep,
and so
absolutely.
and I love my horse, but I didn't think he was going to teach me anything. I was going to teach him everything. So, it was a real turnaround for me to find this other way to be with them, and also to be in this space of learning how to do this work where the horses were all respected, was very different. So they weren't slaves. And they weren't objects to feed egos. They were literally treated like sentient beings and sovereign beings who had a say, which followed me into this work that we do now.
It makes me think a lot that our relationship with horses is a great metaphor for how we live and treat one another. And when I was a child, there was always this whole idea of breaking the horse, forcing the issue. This horse is going to do what we want, and less of an idea about being in a partnership and harnessing that power. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit to that whole idea of forcing issues versus tapping into the power of the connection.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is what I learned when I went out to Tucson, was that when you, let's say, invite through your body language and through your respectful, honestly asking a question versus making a demand, making a statement with force, using equipment that can subdue a horse, that was really different for me. And we worked at what we call at liberty with these horses. They were free in a round pen. And so what we had to learn was to get right with ourselves. We had to learn to be honest about what was really going on. And that was news to me. First of all, because I worked in an industry that was all about not being who you are and not, as some aspirational image or some idea of some mayonnaise is going to make your life better, or, a cosmetic or a bank card. And it was crazy what we believed, the way I lived. And so the idea of an image being useless to a horse, to a real horse, your image is not what they are interested in, or your story. They're interested in who and where are you right now with me, and how do I feel toward you, which is the most important thing, is trust. And what do they trust? They trust congruence. When your insides match your outsides. So learning to back myself up down into myself was a huge journey for me. And I think for most people who went to school there, it was like, okay, well, what am I bringing in here? Am I bringing some idea or some notion that I'm going to dominate this horse who's free to make a choice? It was really challenging for a lot of people to get that. And so it just shifted my world to learn this. And then after that is when my partner David and I met, and then when we heard that statistic about 22 suicides a day, that's when we started to craft a curriculum for people who were veterans, active duty military, and then wound up with first responders who have to go home every day and settle down. We started to apply this type of approach, which is you bringing yourself, your vulnerability. You have to be you are vulnerable with horses because they're big, and if a horse has a choice, and they're prey animals and they can see something and get really worked up, or they move fast and they weigh 10 times what we weigh, people learn real quick where their bodies are.
Yeah, I imagine they do.
Yeah, but they still bring their stories, and the horses aren't really interested in the stories. They're interested in who are you right now. So the journey for them is the same as it was for me, which is like, okay, I'm a beginner again. Adults don't like that. No adults like that. And, I'm a beginner again. I have to learn to cultivate this space between stimulus and response, that great quote that's attributed to Viktor Frankl of in between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom to choose our response. And in that response lies all our freedom and growth. That's kind of our mantra, is because the horses, we teach people how to navigate with them without forcing them, using what we call minimum essential pressure. You expand that space of, well, who am I? How am I coming across? Because the horse will tell you.
Yes, they have a way of telling you, don't they? And I think one of the wonderful things about horses is that because of their size, it's not like you can have an interaction at the, at your office or the barracks or whatever, and it goes a certain way that doesn't work out too well, and you can sort of shuffle it away. But in real time with a horse, and you get that feedback, you can't shuffle it away and sort of move on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's actually because it's visceral, and the horse doesn't ever think, oh, well, I'm not going to fidget or move away because I don't want to hurt this person's feelings. They do, how they feel is what they do. So they provide a very effective mirror of honesty without any judgment. They don't care. I mean, they don't think, oh, that jerk, I'm not interacting with them again. So because as soon as we change, the horse goes, oh, there you are. And so they're honest, and yet they don't have judgment. And that's where human beings, we live in this world of judgment and stories and meaning to everything. And he doesn't like me, and I blah, blah, blah. Or I can't say something about this even though I want to. We do this to ourselves. That's our lives. That's how we got socialized.
And that has to be a very profound thing with veterans and first responders, because the experiences they've been through or are still going through are so intense that to be able to get some space between how you feel now in the present in the round pen with the horse and what has happened in the past, that has to be one of the biggest challenges, I would think, because we show up to everything, don't we, with our own history, our own culture, our own ideas.
Yeah, that's right. And I think for the folks we started to work with, the vets and the first responders, they tend to be all on or all off. And that's the culture they came from. So they learned how to override their nervous systems. They learned how to push through fear, just override it all the time. And one of the funny things I say to these people is that, when you override your nervous system all the time, you run into the burning building. You enter a place, you kick down a door, and who's on the other side doesn't have your best interest in mind. Your nervous system knows that, but your training overrides it, and it's exhausting. And they all say that. They're like, wow, I am exhausted. And so it's not like they're broken. They're just exhausted from living this all on, all off life. And so we help them they laugh when we say it, because it's like, yeah, I really like a break from this, but I don't know how else to be. And so the horses just give us another way to be, which is to approach with grounded, centered. We teach tools to help them learn to do that for themselves, so that when they go home, they can do it at home, which they do. And they learn how to settle down and approach the horse in a way that's more like oblique, which as horses don't go straight at things, they kind of go sideways. They're a little more like cats. And so to learn to settle oneself down enough to approach a horse in a way that makes sense to a horse and isn't threatening is a real journey.
What do you think makes it about the horse relationship that helps people who are used to being so action driven and hypervigilant? Is there something within the horse and the magic, for want of a better word, being around the horse that makes people sort of want to participate? Because one of the issues here has to be that people have to want something, don't they, to be fully engaged.
Yeah.
And what is it about horses, do you think, that helps people with that engagement?
I would say horses are beautiful. they have a mythos about them, or a magic in mythology. They show up, and they are very engaging creatures because they're so beautiful and they're big. I would say that part of it is the novelty. So they're not, well, we had a very funny person who was a Navy corpsman in the military, in the Navy, and that's a medic kind of person in the Navy, and she had turned into a clinician. She got her MSW and she turned into a clinician, and so she said to us, you know how I get them here? I tell them this is therapy, but you don't have to talk. So
great.
It was really funny. She was like, and these vets were saying, well, what does a horse have to do with anything that I'm trying to deal with? But actually, because if you can get them there, you can get people there who do want to change. We can't work with people who don't, because that's a closed book.
Sure.
But anyone who wants to change and learn more about themselves and learn how they come across, which is what they learn, and how to manage that, then it translates to life at home, which they find out really quickly. Their nervous systems are settled. They don't. I mean, one Marine, or what, I can't remember who she was, but she said, you know what? I painted a room with my husband and we didn't kill each other. It was like, that's a miracle.
There's a yardstick for you right there. That's great.
And everybody knew what she was talking about because she had more space, back to the space thing, she had more space in her to tolerate what her husband's way of doing things was, which she didn't before. So it's very palpable and translatable to their lives. But back to your question about the horses, I think because they're big, I think because they're so kind.
Right, so kind.
And they are so, this paradox of big but gentle, stoic in a way. I mean, they stand there and you're used to a dog who knows you, and these horses don't know you, and they really operate from trust, not from familiarity. So if I go in the barn and I'm all worked up about something, the horse I have had since 2008 looks at me like, hey.
He's not going to say, I know you're having a bad day today, Jane. He's going to be like,
Yeah, come back in when you're something.
Yeah.
But every day is different for them. It's not just loyalty, it's trust. So to learn that, and we teach people that in the beginning, we tell them how horses operate. Just to answer your thing about what makes them want to do this, is we tell them who they are, not what they do, but who they are as prey animals, and the fact they've been around for a long time, and also the fact that we domesticated them 6,000 years ago. But it's only been in the last 120 years that we haven't had to do with horses.
right.
So it's in our DNA, not too far back, all of us. And so we help people understand, or we want them to understand, you're remembering something.
Oh, that's so interesting. So it almost kind of digs deep into the collective.
Yeah, and in 120 years ago, all of us would have had to navigate around them or engage with them in some way because we were dependent on them, and you would see them around, whereas now they're a real novelty because you don't see them, and the ones you do see you can't engage with. So it's a very inviting, because we give them, we're very transparent. The horse isn't your uncle or your grandmother, and there's not a metaphor for who they are. We tell them who they really are and how they see the world, and what it takes that they base their engagement with us on trust. So what is a good leader? What's a trustworthy leader? And everybody knows what that is: consistent, fair, not coming in yelling, and not erratic. Any number of things that one would associate with good leadership. So we're kind of teaching them trust-based leadership.
And of course, they've been through a situation where leadership and who is leading can make the difference between getting out of here alive or not, or however the situation goes down. So tapping into that whole idea of leadership and coming together is what they have experienced all the time. It's for many, I'm sure, a life and death.
Oh, yeah. And they know a good leader from a not good leader. there is such a thing as friendly fire.
Yes, yes,
We know
exactly.
that they're not all good leaders, and so these folks are really, really sensitive to that. So I think you're right. It's an aspirational thing for them to want to be a good leader, and so they're willing to be a beginner and let go of some of their stoicism and they start out like this. They all start out like that. And then they come
Right.
forward when they start to engage with the horses, because they get more humble, they get curious, and they start to realize, wow, how I come across is kind of harsh. Or I'm shut down. It's not enough, because the horse doesn't react to that either. If you don't show up in your body, the horse is like, I don't see you. I don't know where you are.
And there's so much power in vulnerability, and yet the systems that these people have been working through, the last thing I'm sure you ever want to show is any kind of vulnerability at
Yeah.
all.
Right. Military cultures in general.
Yeah.
Our culture anyway, we value strength, we like money, we like that kind of stuff.
Right.
But with these folks, they've really been trained out of, because they have to run into things we'd run away from.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
as simple as that. I mean, when you override your nervous system, all the lights are blaring. This is dangerous. Don't go. And you're going, nope, I'm trained to do this. That's what we call expensive to the nervous system. And they kind of understand from the way we talk and the way we tell them about the horses that, they're vulnerable all the time.
Yeah.
They know that. They know if they make a mistake, they're dinner. And it's not like, oh, those poor horses. It's like, no, this is the world. That's their world. And we are both predators and prey. So kind of have to make peace with that. And we have trouble making peace with the prey part of ourselves.
Yes, yes, we do. Yes, we do. And as you say, that's trained out of us.
Yeah, even socialized out of us. I mean, even not military cultures, and now we're working with more and more people who are not military, but who really love the idea of having permission to settle down and to be real, and to just be honest about what's going on and express authenticity, and learn about themselves. And that's the other piece, is that when the work that we do, you're not learning some horrible thing that then is terrible. It's more like, wow, I didn't realize I was holding all this. Do I have to do that? I mean, and it's kind of like there's a freedom in the truth of it, as opposed to punishment. It's not your worst fear. It's like, wow, not only did I see this that I didn't know and wasn't working, or I was scaring people. A lot of these people scare
right.
their kids.
Yeah.
And one guy said to us, my kid came and sat on my lap for the first time.
Oh, wow.
So it was really moving to him to have that happen. But he realized what he was putting out was this like demand and scaring his kids, and or my dog wasn't so crazy. Well, who wasn't so crazy?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's funny what people say, but I think the idea of learning that your nervous system would rather be in this regulated state is good for all of us. So we're seeing more people. We're seeing more clinicians. That's an easy one, because they need the compassion to help with compassion fatigue.
Yeah,
and we see a lot of other people who are in the healing arts, or yoga people, or people who just want to deal with stuff better and have more space in that space to navigate challenges.
Yeah, one of the things that I talk about with living with inner elegance is talking about that space between the emotion and the reaction as stepping into your elegant space, as a way to give it a kind of sense of some kind of place. And every day when we get up, we have all of these choices. I think what your work is helping people to understand is that we do have choices around how we think, how we react, there I go again, this is making me really angry. Now, why is that, and what can I do? And sort of being able to take a little bit of a breath and make the choice of creating a safe space for somebody else, which then, of course, ironically, creates a safer space for us and then all of us.
Yeah,
So
I think that's right.
I think the ripple effect of your work is really fascinating. Do you get a lot of feedback from the families?
Well, we get feedback through the people we work with about their families,
Right.
and they're amazed. And they will tell us, my wife is really happy. My wife is really happy I'm coming here. And they want them to keep coming. I mean, they really want them to do it because they exactly this we wouldn't call it elegant, but it is elegant because we work with a more different kind of population, but it is elegant because it's just allowing and tolerant and compassionate and listening better. People listen better when they do this work, and who doesn't want to have somebody listen? Plus, when people we've worked with, some executives, people are really successful, they're not used to listening. They're used to telling, and they take
Right.
it home. And so to learn to lead by listening is a very different energy than you put out when you just tell.
And there are different ways of listening too, aren't there? Because we always know when we are somebody appears to be listening to us, and we just know they're waiting for the next moment that they can jump in,
Yes.
and have their point of view. And
I think that's right. And I think that we can tell, and that's the other thing that's kind of fun about this, is that we know when someone is being incongruent. We know that. We can feel it.
Right.
The face doesn't match the words, doesn't match the body language. We know that people aren't being honest. But we're, again, socialized out of saying that doesn't quite feel right. Mm-hmm. What you said, what we do is we tune it out, or we think something's wrong with us, or we think we have to change it. We do all this stuff and because we don't use that kind of language, whereas a horse is going to go, not buying this one, I'm out of here, or I'm moving, or they don't cooperate. I think that for us to be more congruent is better for us, but we can't always do that. So just acknowledging it to ourselves, like, this doesn't feel right. Maybe there's another way I could ask the question, or maybe I can just say, are you okay? Like if you came to me and you were out of whack, I could say, are you okay, Carolyn?
Right.
And if you didn't want to tell me, at least I've acknowledged to myself, something is up.
Right.
I've seen something.
Yes.
And if you get defensive and mad, that's not my problem.
Right.
But at least I've had what we call had my own back. At
Right.
least I've acknowledged it to myself. And sometimes with a boss, you can't do that. You can't say, hey, are you okay? You can't. You just have to deal with something. But if you acknowledge it to yourself, like, I'm agitated. This doesn't feel right to me. At least your body knows, okay, she knows, or he knows that that's not cool.
And I think there is such a strong link between the emotions and the thoughts that we have downloading into every cell of our body. So the idea of people on the front line, if you like, having this hypervigilance and having to override that all the time, I imagine that not only is it emotionally exhausting, but it has to be physically exhausting in the end,
Sure.
too, I would think.
Yeah, physically exhausting, and it makes them sick.
I would imagine that, yeah.
So they get all sorts of chronic things.
Yeah,
IBS is a big one.
sure.
When you live in fight or flight, the last thing that's important is your digestive system. So they live in a kind of a chronic state of contraction like that.
Right.
Or they have headaches, or they have, of course, the lower back is always a favorite. But, they have all these things that are manifestations of holding tension or holding in and not expressing in a way that makes sense to people. And I think that's part of why they take their lives. They just don't want to deal with it. It's too much. And they're afraid of what they're going to do, and they don't want to be a burden. That's a big part of it.
Well, it's a heartbreaking situation, isn't it?
It's terrible. And they don't feel that they fit into civilian culture because they don't.
Right.
You know,
Yes.
their skills are lethal. That's why a lot go into law enforcement. A lot of the folks we see are veterans and law enforcement or
Right.
emergency workers. That's the same culture. It's like, ugh, all on or all off. That's what that's the world they're comfortable with. So we're giving them a middle ground. And also the people who work with them, or like I said, the people who do yoga, people who are trying to help people settle down need help settling down too.
Yeah, and I think we could all do with some settling down.
Yeah.
Could you talk to me a little bit about the loneliness epidemic and the communication crisis that we're in? I know that the Surgeon General a couple of years ago did put out a word that we are officially in a loneliness epidemic, folks. How does your work tie in with loneliness?
That's also a good question and a good point, is that I think what has happened is between technology, which is a big part of it, we're disembodied. We're engaging, but not there. We're not seeing the other person's body or body language. And we have these sort of, what would you call, pseudo-friendship through social media. And then on top of that, we had the pandemic, which forced people to separate and not congregate in a place because it wasn't safe.
Yeah, we were advised to avoid one another,
Yeah,
weren't we?
that's right. And I think, and kids going to school, people who were launching were not able to launch because of that. That was a huge crisis in connection. Mm-hmm. And I would say that, you know, with the loneliness thing, I know Murphy is his name or something like that, the guy, the Surgeon General. He did that huge study. And I think that the loneliness thing is also because of mistrust, which is really sad, that every time there's something, in my view anyway, every time there's something good that happens, let's say we figured out, these 90 and 95 masks work during the pandemic.
Right.
Then there's these scammers who come in and are wheeling and dealing. So there's this sort of feeling, at least I have, underneath it, like, well, okay, what's really going on and what can I trust? And in a way, diversity is really great. And in another way, it kind of pockets people in a certain sense that they're not sure where other people are coming from. And I think that there's a lot that has happened in this 21st century, the internet and then the remote working.
Yes,
so
that
people
too.
aren't coming back to work. They're working in their own places.
Yep.
And I think that there's just so many factors, and there's a guy, I can't remember his name, who did a study on loneliness, very famous guy, and he was at the University of Chicago, and he basically said that when people first get lonely, it's a signal like hunger or thirst.
Yes.
Your inclination is to connect, but if you stay lonely long enough, your inclination is to not trust. And then you start reading into things and you start being suspicious, and there's all sorts of not good things that come from too much loneliness. And I think maybe the pandemic had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things are like a perfect storm. And the irony of the whole thing for me is that we are the first generation of people to be globally connected so quickly. In seconds, a message can go around the globe, where there's such an irony here between all of this clever technology and who we still are as tribal people who run on connection, kindness, helping each other.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's our this guy Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote that book *Sapiens*.
Yes.
He talks about this, that our operating systems are however many thousands of years old or millennia old, but we're behaving. We've added these things now that don't, they're supposedly going to, let's say technology, make us connected, but they don't, because there's no embodiment, there's no tribal feel, there's no interdependence. You know, there's this hierarchical stuff that's not interdependent. And, you know, when you chase after money, that's not connection. We're not supporting our need for connectivity in a way, except with these exclusive groups we think we feel comfortable with.
Right.
But I think because it's coming from a place of, it's coming from a place of insecurity and fear, so it doesn't really deliver, you know. And like, to get back to the horses, they're just there, and they are completely wrapped up in trust and in we. They think only we.
They think only we. And I love that whole idea of, you know, back in the day, people would build castles, right, and castle walls, and I'm going to be okay because I'm going to be in there, and those people out there are, you know, whatever they are, and they're probably the enemy. And I just love it that horses are like, castle walls? No such thing.
Yeah, they don't see it that way at all. They don't, because our separation from one another is based on stories. It's based on myth and stories, and the horses don't. That's not how. I don't know how they ever went into war, and they did. We lost 8 million in was it World War I?
World War I.
8 million horses died in service of this thing that they had no idea why we would be doing that.
Yes.
Why we would be doing that. And so their whole nature is something we could learn from. Their whole cultural socialization, you know, movement, body movement, you know, that sort of usefulness. And they operate not in hierarchies, but in heterarchies, which is whoever's good at something, that's who takes the lead. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, wouldn't that be great? That seems like a really good idea.
Yeah, it's a floating crap game for them. It's like let's go over here. Okay, well you're good at this, and it changes during their life cycle. It changes depending on how many foals there are, who's old, who's weak, they just operate with a knowingness of who might have a solution.
Explain to us a little bit about how horses' body language gives people a sort of, wait a minute now, you're a little close, I need you closer. How do horses talk with their bodies?
I would say mostly what I see in the horses is when they brace. When they brace, and they do that with equipment, you know, they have to brace when you get on them in a saddle. They've got to try to balance themselves, because, as I said before, if they make a mistake, their dinner, that is their world, and the biggest part of their brain is the cerebellum. So if I'm upright, I'm okay. If I fall down, I'm dead. So they don't want to be out of balance. So I would say we watch that. We watch the bracing. The expression "heads up" comes from horses.
Oh yes,
it means we're running adrenaline. The expression "level-headed" comes from horses because we're running endorphins. So we watch their heads. We watch their eyes, you know, the expression in their eyes. And if they're worried, you know, their eyes get kind of like, woo, they get scared looking. And if their eye is soft, which as a horse person, you know that when a horse's eye is soft, they're cooperative and they're trusting. Their nostrils, they're licking and chewing. We watch that a lot, and they're very clear about that. So we teach people we ask them, you know, see what you notice, you know, see if you can get a sense of what he likes or doesn't like, or she doesn't like or likes. And horses will move around to, just like you would if somebody came up and scratched your back, you'd stand still, you know,
right, yeah, exactly.
They keep doing
This is good.
This is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you would be able to tell whether somebody likes something or not. And the same with the horses. They will stay still or they'll fidget. We use fidgeting a lot as a way to understand, because if they're afraid or not comfortable, they have to move their feet. And we have their backs in the sense of if they fidget or move, we respect that, and we don't try to hold them still or minimize it. We go like, what's up? Let's find out.
What is it for you that helps you to sleep at night, Jane?
I would say I would say that for me now, it's feeling like I served, feeling like I did something that was useful to other people who didn't know some things or some way. And it's not like helping in the sense of them being less than or more needy. It's more like I'm expanding people's awareness, expanding people's space between stimulus and response. And if I can do that or work toward it, I spend a lot of time running this organization. So if I can work toward that aim of help serving more people, expanding people's worlds, then I feel comfortable in my own skin. And if I'm lucky, I can sleep.
Well, I think one of the things that we tend to forget is that every single thing we do affects somebody else or something else, and then that has a ripple effect. So if you go home in the evening and instead of chewing somebody's ears off because you've had a terrible day, you're able to go home and then the person who is there at home is, and on it goes. And I think we tend in this world to underestimate the power of the ripple effects. Kindness, consideration is hugely beneficial, and it just ripples out, just like fear and distrust has the same.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think that's exactly true. I think you can go either way. And if I have a chance, if I have the wherewithal to be pleasant to someone and thank them or acknowledge just like you were saying, with the horses or people, if you acknowledge them as sovereign beings, not just a role or certainly not a hierarchical thing, but some kind of acknowledgement of them as a human being, then we all get better.
Yes, we all get better. Yeah, yes.
And we're all more civilized and more respectful. And what is the harm in that? I don't get anything negative about that. It's not people pleasing. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just acknowledging.
Yes.
And, when I can do that, and I know it. When I don't have the space for that, it's not a good day.
It's not a good day. It doesn't feel good, does it?
Mm-mm.
And we are all interconnected, in this universe, with our world, with the animals, the creatures. It's all codependent, So I think what that does is tap into that sort of universal truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's our heads, it's the mind, it's these stories, it's the news, it's this pitting things against one another all the time that's made everybody, I think, more frightened and less engaged in a I have to, if I trust myself, I don't need to worry about if I trust you, but I think we get kind of mistrustful of our own selves.
Yes, well, I think, mistrust creates more mistrust, doesn't it? And then that has a ripple effect too.
Yeah, I think the more we can get down in our bodies and settle in and start to see the world through the lens of the whole picture, and the horses are just a gateway to nature. It's not just horses. They operate by nature's rules, and they are great examples of half wild, half domestic. They're half wild, we know that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They're not just dog. They don't surrender to us like a dog does. But even a dog, when they get going on a bone,
Yeah, that's right.
all bets are off, right?
All bets are off.
But mostly they live with us and they surrender to us. And I think horses don't. They will bide their time till they can get away and go live their lives. And I think that's a cool thing to interact with that, which we don't do that with very many big animals.
Well, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for bringing your light to this world.
Thank you.
This work at the Equus Effect is so powerful and so important. Would you like to let folks know how they can get more information about the Equus Effect?
Sure.
How to reach you?
Sure. Well, we have a website that is www.theequuseffect.com. THEEQUUS, for those of you who've done your Latin homework. It's the Latin word for horse, equus, and then Effect, EFFECT.org. And we are, if you want to take a tour of the website and see what we say and how we operate and what we care about and who's welcome, which is almost anybody who wants to come and learn more about just things that people don't usually talk about, and it's kind of a fun, enlightening experience for most people. So nobody's suffering there. Everybody's like, wow, I didn't see that before. I didn't realize that. That was a habit I don't need, and it's very positive. So enlightening and direct, and usually very interesting to people. So, we definitely do, our bread and butter, or our commitment is to the veterans and the first responders and the emergency workers. But I would say, we're forming groups actually with kids now.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
That's great.
That came as a surprise to me. Somebody wanted to bring some kids, and I'm like, we don't work with kids, blah, blah, blah. And then when I saw how the horses reacted to the kids, they were like, kids, and they just put their heads down and they loved the kids. So I was I guess we're going to work with kids, and they love it, and they're like really real. They don't have all the stuff in their heads, and the horses really like that. So it's a nice break for them. So we're going to start forming some groups with kids too.
Oh, that's really good to hear. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here. I couldn't be more thrilled.
Thank you very much.
So moved by this work.
Well, it's fun.
Well, it's fun, it's informative, and powerfully important. So,
yeah. Well,
thank you for sharing your light.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I've been here with Jane Strong of the Equus Effect. If you would like to know more about living with inner elegance, go to my website, carolinphipps.com. Podcasts, videos, articles, all there to help us to lead a life of more inner elegance. And certainly my guest today, Jane Strong, embodies that to a T. Thank you.